Are you there, Fortnite? Do you want to talk?
Oh yeah, my bad. So I got a question relating on your position on the essence and energies distinction. Right. So you affirm, right, it's a real distinction between the essence and the energies.
Well, real distinction is a later term that's a late scholastic, post even Aquinas term. So, um, depending upon what you mean by that, if you think that real means composition, partition, or division, no. But if we mean a real ontological distinction, yes. And so the Orthodox response is that the same level of distinction between the persons is the same type of distinction between essence and energy.
Okay. Do you have like a set definition you can give out?
I mean, the Cappadocians did all this without scholastic distinctions. So what do you mean? The definition is that just as the Father is distinct from the Son, so also the essence is distinct from the energy.
Right, but this varies across interpretations, right? If you're a Scotus, you would say that's simply a formal distinction, which is widely different from a real distinction.
Right.
And
And
you have
so the way
numerous
to
different
right.
interpretations of that. So how would you understand a real distinction
Right. So
between
that's why
persons and energies?
if you follow the debate when it gets to the point of Palamas, the way that it would easily also just cancel out all the Scotist arguments. The argument isn't ultimately about distinguishing the attributes amongst themselves, but rather what do we participate in. So the SCOTUS could never answer what precisely we're participating in, and that's why, quite literally, the debate with the Barlayamite just shifts right into what it is we participate in. So even if you wanted to say these distinctions are quote formal, that doesn't do any good to talk about what we participate in. So do we participate in a formal conceptual distinction, formal or conceptual?
Formalities. Scotus will simply tell you formalities are not purely mental conceptions, right? They're simply
No, I
aspects of a
meant
whole
you're
being.
correct. You're correct. I meant to say formal or conceptual. Like it won't matter how you cash that out because the debate ends up being do we participate in God's glory or not?
Right, but I'm still okay. So I get you now. Okay. So what would you say if I simply say that a conceptual distinction is a distinction with a basis in the thing itself or a basis in reality, right? Why do I need to draw a big ontological division, so to speak,
Yeah.
between the essence and
So
the energies who have an
you
imparticiple
just
aspect?
said the very thing I reject. So distinction does not entail composition or division. That's fundamental to our theology. So the fact that I say that there is a difference between essence and energy does not entail division. So you just imported the Roman Catholic type of
Sure, right.
argumentation.
The thing is, though, I'm asking you because you need to divide the essence and the energies for you to participate in
I
one
don't.
aspect,
I
right?
no. We
Without
don't
the
have to.
essence
No,
being in it.
it's that doesn't entail division. Distinction does not entail composition or division. Just like
You can say that,
no,
right? But
no. That's but
you
okay. The
haven't
justice.
justified how
Listen,
you participate in one aspect of a different ontological being
it's not a
without the
different.
other
It's not
being
a
included.
different ontological being because the
So then
being of
how
God.
is there an
What?
ontological
Let me
distinction
explain.
between the same being?
In the same way that there's a distinction between the Father and the Son, that's ontological.
Right, but we wouldn't say that's an ontological distinction because there are
Well,
not three beings, right?
ontology is not only related to the word being. So again, you're assuming your
Okay, so what do you
metaphysics.
take
So
ontology to
listen.
be?
Well, again, the being of God is an energy for us. It's not his essence.
So you think being is simply the energy, right? You don't think you can predicate that the
You
energy,
can't
not
predicate
can,
anything of the divine essence.
you can't predicate the essence exists.
The existence of God is also an energy.
So would you
That's
say
the Cappadocian
Scholorus
argument.
was wrong when he said that the energies
Who?
and the
Who was wrong?
Scholorus, right? He says that the energies and the essence of God are united in one existence. Would you say he was wrong when
Well,
he
the way that
articulated
they're
that?
united is in the mode of the persons that have the essence, and that the energy. And by the way, if you read Capus's essay, he shows that Scholarios rejects the Thomistic view of saying that the distinction is conceptual. He says it's a real distinction.
Sure, I never said Scholorus was a Thomist, though.
My point is that the essence of what Scholarius rejects in Aquinas is what I reject. That there's no real essence energy distinction.
Right. So, have you read Scholorus and would you understand him to affirm a real distinction between the essence and the energies?
No, I understand that for him, formal distinction is his own category. I understand that.
Right. So, if we take his category, he's an actual saint, right? And we understand the
I don't accept.
Cappadocians
No, I don't
themselves.
accept that he is. He's not a saint. So
So
can
you
I?
wouldn't accept Scholorus as a saint, right? You
No,
wouldn't
no, no,
accept
no,
his
no. I
synodical
thought you said.
poems in
Excuse me. I thought you said. I thought you
1368 or
said SCOTUS.
1361.
Chill out. I thought you said SCOTUS.
My bad. Yeah, Scholorus. My bad. They're very
Okay.
similar names. I understand. Yeah.
No,
So
we
would
understand
you
he is.
take?
Yes, he's a saint.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so would you say Scholorus would affirm a real distinction between the essence and the energies?
He affirms the Palamite position.
Right, but you would not. Would you say that's a real distinction between the essence and the energies?
Yeah, because that's the whole purpose of the whole Tikon Pino thesis.
Well, yeah. So
Did
that's
you
two
did
things
you
there.
read the Tikon Pino thesis?
Yeah, I've read his Being and Naming Essence and Energies of
Okay.
God, and then his second later work, What Are Divine Energies?
Okay.
Right, which is a much smaller dissertation. I want to talk about those two things there. So first of all, with
Well, hold on. I have a question for you though.
right,
Can I ask you a question?
sure, yeah.
By the way, so if you've read that much, then you probably read the Kappas essay, right, on essence energy in the theology of Saint Donatus Scholarius.
I've read the half the introduction, like the historical aspect. Yes, I haven't read his what's it called?
Well, this is just a paper.
His thesis, right? Because I don't see the relevance in his thesis.
Well, this is just a paper from a Uniate arguing that.
I know.
Huh?
I know. Yeah, Caps is a union. I'm aware of that.
No, but I'm saying that this is just a paper where he makes the point that although Scholarius likes a lot of what's in Aquinas, the chief thing that he disagrees with is Thomas's position on equating attributes with essence.
Yeah, I'm aware. The thing is, I'm not positing Thomas Aquinas' position, though.
Okay, so if we're going to argue the Scotus position, then it's going to turn towards, because even Bradshaw says, yeah,
I'm not even positing the
what?
Scotus position. I'm positing
You're not.
Scholaris' position.
But Scholaris' position is, I would argue, the Palamite position.
Right, and then we go back to it's a real distinction, and then I'm simply asking, and then we go back to the same topic of discussion. I don't really see the relevance in talking about Scholaris was an Thomist.
I don't understand why you're trying to argue the Scholarian position then. What's the point of that?
Because if we understand Scholaris, right, in his third tome and his sixth tome, right, his commentaries on the Akendoios, Barlaam, Aquinas, and Aristotle. Yeah, Akendinos. I pronounce things wrong. My bad. But yeah, so we would understand. He specifically writes that a real distinction between essence and energies between creatures is because of their efficiency, and that does not apply to God, right? And if we read later on in his third tome, page 226, he said that a formal distinction neither makes a division of reality or a composition, but it's grounded
and that's
upon
everything I've been saying the whole time, that this distinction does not entail composition and division. That's what I've been saying.
Right, but that would not apply for what's understood to be a real distinction.
That's why I said at the beginning that using the terminology of real distinction is really confusing, because that's a later scholastic definition that's post-Aquinas. So I said at the very beginning that the level of the distinction is the same for the energies as it is between the persons.
Yeah, but that differs among positions, like I've said, right?
Okay, so let's make it really clear then. In Leviticus 9, we have the manifestation of the glory of God in time and space, and the Israelites bow down and worship it. What is that?
Sure, we would say that's the energy.
Okay. So it's not the essence, right?
Sure, but if we read the Synod of 1351, it has to be contemplated with it.
What has to be contemplated with it?
The essence always has to be contemplated with it. With any
I didn't say that it's not contemplated with it, but,
I know,
but you're not participating in it.
Yeah, sure. I'm simply saying that you need to clarify. You're not participating in the identity of the essence now.
Right. So you're participating in the energy, and that's why the fourth of the Palamite synods condemns the Thomistic position of Prochorus.
Right, but you wouldn't say that Barlaam himself was a Thomist.
No, I think he was a Greek monk or monastic, or I forget exactly what he might have been an abbot or something, but no, he's not one-to-one a Thomist, but he...
Yeah, right. Scholorus says he's anomalous, right? He upholds William of Bachman's position that there's only a simply logical distinction between them.
Right. No, I agree with Bradshaw's argument that, for example, katapanoia, it can be only a conceptual distinction or a conceptual distinction that's also in the object or in the thing. So it can be both. It could be either one.
Right. Okay. So you would think that generally speaking, a real distinction is simply improper terminology.
Again, I said at the very beginning, like Bradshaw says, it's confusing and not helpful to use the terminology of late scholasticism for people that are writing way before that. And so the easiest way to solve this problem with like a Scotus or something like that would be to say, well, what are we participating in? If it's not the essence of God, then it has to be some real uncreated energy, right?
Right. But you, okay. So
So
you,
why are
in
you
your
even arguing
previous,
with me? Like, what's the
right. Because the thing is, you've already conceded that the terminology itself is wrong. Yet when you talked with Dr. David, not Bradshaw, what was his name? Bo Branson. Yes, my bad. You said that the essence and energies are really distinct, and then the persons
yeah?
are
And
also
when I explain
really
when I
distinct.
explain what's real, I give the meaning of that.
Right. And then I asked you before, what was your meaning of it?
And I said again for the third time, the level of distinction between essence and energy is the same level of distinction between the persons. So let's talk about Thomism as an example.
That's not a definition. That's an example.
There is no definition that if we don't
So you
use
don't
that
have a
terminology.
definition for the distinction you apply to things.
I don't have to have a definition because I'm not scholastic. The scholastics have to
Okay,
define
so to be a
every single thing.
scholastic is to have definitions of distinctions.
Mhm.
Would you say Scholorus was wrong then in his sixth
No,
tome
I
for
don't have any
defining these
problem with
terms?
him trying to work out these distinctions, but I don't think what he's arguing disagrees because when you laid out what it was, he meant a distinction that entails composition or division. And you know, at the very beginning of this discussion, I said that distinction does not entail composition or division. And it's the analogy that even Palamas uses is between the persons.
Sure, right.
Well,
However,
if
you
you're
keep
right,
then
then what's the
applying
problem?
this terminology, which you conceded is incorrect, which you conceded you have no definition for. And then when Scholorus, our saint, by the way, outright defines these terms for us so that we can apply them in our
Yeah, but what
contexts,
you defined was a
you then arbitrarily,
no, it's
right,
not
apply a
arbitrary.
different
It's
term.
it's not arbitrary. You're just
Yes, it
like
is because you don't even have a definition for the term that you're using.
because I don't necessarily have to use that terminology like Bradshaw says. Why do I have to?
Okay, so okay, why does Bradshaw, the scholar, have more precedent over Scholorus's definition, who's a saint and had dogmatic tomes?
Well, again, what you said from Scholarius is not a problem for what I argued.
Right. So if we understand who are saints who define the term as this and that, why then do you equivocate the term into something completely arbitrary, which you have no definition for?
It's not
You say it's the
arbitrary.
same distinction as
It's
the
not
persons.
arbitrary.
What does the distinction between the persons mean?
I'm saying there is no scholastic definition of what a difference between the person and another person is, other than to say that they're really distinct. Like that should
Yes, because they're relatively opposed, right? Because
no.
scholastics would tell you they have
Oh,
numerous
so wait a minute.
categories
Are you
of
no,
what
so now
defines.
you're a scholastic?
No, I'm telling the scholastic position to you because you appeal to the scholastic position.
When?
You said, well, there's no proper definition for the scholastic
Why would
position
we
on the
expect
distinction
that
between the persons.
so do the Cappadocians use scholastic definitions?
No, but
Okay, so
obviously
why
we
do
can
I
still
hold on?
appropriate these
So
terms
could
later
so
on,
wait, so
right?
could we understand those dogmatic teachings before the scholastic definitions?
Sure, right. But then when we come to modern day language, they never spoken English. Then why are we speaking English? We can use
That's an
language
irrelevant argument
linguistics
to what we're talking about.
right, we can use linguistics and terminology later on that's developed
Yeah, I don't have a
for
problem
more
with that, and
specific
nothing
contexts, and
that
we
was
can apply it to their specific
nothing
context.
that was
It's not that
stated. Well, like if you agree with the position that we really participate in uncreated energies, I don't even understand what your problem is with what I'm arguing.
because I'm simply saying that saying it's a real distinction is improper term, which were rejected by our saints. And even Tikhon Philo says it's simply a notional distinction. He has an entire chapter on that.
Well, he argues that the terminology is ambiguous, right?
Yeah, regarding conceptual, but if you also read his analysis on the tomes, he simply says that it's been softened, the distinction
Right.
is softened, right? And that there's a basis in the object or the thing itself, but that we can't say it's a real distinction. And this is what he
So
says in his later work on what are divine energies, right?
wait,
He
so you're
says
saying
that this is why God has
you
no
think that
passive potency.
you think the energies aren't really distinct from the essence?
I wouldn't say we're not really distinct, no, and I haven't seen a single proper citation of that, especially
The
with
Palamite
Scholorus
Synod,
outright
the
denying they're really
Palamite
distinct.
Synod say that. Well, I would say, by the way, that the Palamite Synod trumps Scholaris.
You know, he had a tome. Scholorus had his dogmatic synod as well.
Yeah, but let's talk. Let me just prove it to you, just from straight up theological argumentation. How's that?
No, because if we no, you
No,
look
I'm
at
going
the
to prove
Palamite
it.
synod.
I'm
If you
going to
read
prove
the
it.
Palamite synods, it uses the word logismo, which means by reason alone. How do you understand that?
Yeah, because in that discussion, I know what you're talking about in the Pinot section. So let me show you that. Let me show you the argument, the problem with that.
No, I'm just asking, how do you understand
I'm going to
logismo
show
in
you
the Greek?
the problem with that.
Sure.
So is uncreated glory only conceptually distinguished from the action of creating?
We can say that, sure.
So it's not really distinct. So there's not a real distinction
Sure,
between
it's not
God.
really distinct, no.
Okay, then creation is in reality eternal.
That wouldn't follow because creation is an effect, right? And cause and
No, the
effects are really
action of
distinct.
creating, not creation as an effect, the action.
Right, but then if we read Theophanies' second book, right, he simply says that God is eternally active as an inward operation, right? He doesn't need
No,
to.
I'm talking
He
about
specifies later on that the
that, but
manifestation
creation is not
itself,
an
which is what.
creation. The act of creating is not an inward action.
Yes, it is. If you read Theophanies' book on it, he says that exact same thing. I can quote you it right now.
Well, I don't. I mean, maybe I don't have a problem saying he might be wrong. So you think that the action of creating is
Okay, so would you have a
hold
problem
on? Did
saying
God rest?
Scholastic and not Mark of
No.
Maximus the
Yeah.
Confessor are
The
wrong
principle.
because
Hold on.
Maximus the Confessor says God is an eternally active
I
creator.
agree with that, but that doesn't mean
Okay, so then I don't
no, no,
really
no.
understand
That's
what
the
the position
distinction.
you're
That's the
arguing with.
distinction between first and second actuality.
Sure, would you say God is first actuality and then he moves on a second actuality?
No, the action of creating is not that's a power that he has that he doesn't have to actualize. So he's eternally creator in the sense of having that power. That does not
Okay,
mean
so it's in first
that does
act
not mean
technically. In relation to actualization, it's in first act.
what?
In relation to it being actually
Mhm.
actualized, it's in first act.
So you're saying God has always actualized creation.
Not outwardly, no, but it's simply an inward manifestation of his being. When it's
So God
manifested
has
outwardly
always
is when
God has
creation
always
starts.
created within his being.
Yeah, sure, as an inward expression of his being.
Created within his being.
Sure, just as a priest does not need to be serving divine liturgy to be a priest.
So that's a power that's not yet actualized. That's the point. Did he rest from creating?
Sure, right, but just because it's not outwardly expressed doesn't mean he's not eternally active.
Agreed, but he's not eternally active in the power of creating.
Sure, because the power of creating is external, and that's
Exactly.
active
So
power, not
so then
potency.
did he rest from creating?
Sure, as in the manifestation.
Is the manifestation itself eternal?
I wouldn't say so. No, it begins and ends in
Exactly.
time. That's
Thank
what
you.
Ticonfino said.
Yeah. So there's a distinction between eternal glory and the action of creating.
Sure, we can say there's a virtual distinction between the
No, it's a real
energies.
distinction. It's not virtual, because if it's only virtual, then
No, between the energies themselves, we can say there's a virtual distinction.
so the action of divine knowledge is equated to eternal glory.
Sure, you can say that they're virtually distinct. In reality, sure, you can equate them together.
Well, the Palamite Synod say they're different realities.
Reality is the improper term,
How
right?
could
When they talk about realities,
it's the
they're referring,
terminology
right?
that they use.
Right, they're
How
referring to
could
simply a thing that has a basis in the thing.
how could there be an equating between, say, divine providence and eternal glory?
Well, there's not an equating here
Well, you said
because
they're
what are
only
you referring to?
conceptually. You
Material
said
or
they're only
formal
conceptually
identity here?
distinct.
Right, conceptually distinct destroys formal identity. So when you're saying equating here, you're misinterpreting that because equating here refers to formal identity. They're different formal identities, but we can say they're the same material reality.
So it doesn't get us anywhere because it's the same thing.
Sure, in reality, it's the same thing. Would you say you have numerous different realities in God that
in
all strive
Leviticus
to do one
9,
thing?
is that an eternal manifestation?
Leviticus 9, could you just read the entire verse for me here?
Moses and Aaron went into the tabernacle at the meeting, and they came out and blessed the people. The glory of the Lord appeared to all the people, and fire came down from before the Lord and consumed the burnt offering and the fat on the altar. When the people saw it, they shouted and fell on their faces. Does this theophany come and go?
Sure, we could say theophanies come and go.
Was the manifestation of that theophany itself God himself?
Sure, we can say that.
So it was an energy in space and time?
Sure, because it's manifested, right? But the energy and power itself does not
Okay.
begin and end.
Yeah, but here's the problem.
If the power
Here's the
itself
problem
does
in
not begin
Pino's.
and end, it's always eternally
Here's the
active.
problem in Pino's point here, which is that it kicks the can down the road and moves the problem back a step. Is the manifestation itself fully God?
Sure, yes.
So did God come and go in time and space?
No, right, because the manifestation itself has
You
nothing
just
to do
said the
with first
manifestation
and act.
itself is divine.
Yes, because it's because it's related to God.
Oh, it's related to God. Is it really fully
Sure.
God? Did it
Sure.
come and go in time and space?
No, because it's the
So it didn't
appearance.
come and go. So yeah, exactly. So here's the problem.
Because it's the appearance that came in time.
But the appearance is God, as you just said.
Not really. No, I wouldn't
No,
say
it's
that.
not
I would
God.
say
So
the
the
energy
glory of
that's
God.
manifested.
So the glory of God appeared, but it's
the
not really
energy
God.
that's manifested is fully God, but the appearance of
The
that
appearance
energy
is
isn't
the
God,
energy.
right?
It's the theophany. It's the
That
theophany.
wouldn't be proper, right? So you would say you can see the energy.
It's the theophany, isn't it?
Yeah, but would you see the energy physically?
What does it say in the text that I just read to you? All of Israel saw the glory of the Lord and they fell down.
Sure, right. But I can simply say that's the created manifestation
There
of
is
the
no
energy,
created
which is God.
manifestation of the theophanies.
Yes,
No,
there
there's
is, right?
not.
Palamas himself
Theophanies are
says
not
that there are
creatures.
some theophanies.
Theophanies are not
Palamas himself
creatures. You
says there are
just got
some
exposed.
theophanies
Theophanies are not
which are
creatures.
created and then some
No,
others
they're
aren't
not.
created.
This is the glory cloud. It's not a creature.
You can say the glory cloud isn't a creature, but you need to justify that off patristics, right? Because Palamas
It's
himself,
called the
and I can
glory
find
of
the passage.
God.
Right. If you
Is
I
the
can
glory of God a
once again, if you're
creature?
not gonna
So now you're a
is the glory of
Muslim.
God a creature? No, right. But I can simply say that the appearance or
The manifestation you already said is God. You just contradicted
the
yourself.
appearance, right, of
The
the
appearance is the
energy, I
manifestation. You
can
just
create
contradicted
effect.
yourself.
I can say the appearance of the energy is a created effect.
No, it's not. It's a theophany. Now you're a Roman Catholic.
You can say
No,
no, it's not.
everybody
It's not a
knows it
theophany.
is.
That
That's
doesn't
the
logically
So you're
follow.
not actually Orthodox, are you?
Well, would you say
So he's not
Palamas was wrong when he
Orthodox.
said?
See that? So this is what Roman Catholics do. They mine the Orthodox stuff to come and try to argue Scotism. And then when we go to the actual passages, you heard him melt down. Look at all that. So that was all a bunch of sophistry, just like with the Thomas earlier. Here's a bunch of fancy citations. What about the formal distinctions? What did he just say about the theophany there? He went from saying it's really God, it's really a manifestation, but it's a creature. The glory cloud is not a creature. You can't worship creatures. They fall down and worship the theophany.